Happy New Year! It's 2025, which means we are officially halfway through the 2020s. How does that make you feel? What albums do you have on your all-decade list so far? Okay, maybe we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit. Let's talk about the best albums of just 2024. I am here to tell you my personal favorite albums from the past year, my favorite albums to drop in 2024. And I mean, who else are you going to trust but some guy on the internet who didn't really listen to a ton of music this year? Yeah, I'll admit, I've been a little out of touch with what the kids are listening to these days. I have been hearing a lot about this Chappell Roan fella though, so maybe I'll check them out. But okay, being real, 2024 was the first year that I really felt like old and out of touch from the music scene. And that could be just because I was traveling, I was on the road a lot, and then I moved. A lot of stuff going on in my life. But regardless though, I think I've pulled together a really interesting lineup of favorite albums from a very stacked year. There was a lot of incredible releases this year, and I don't know if there's a list quite like mine out there. I was very picky about the music that I chose and put in this list because, as mentioned, there's a lot of great stuff out there. So you can say what you want about the list. I think it is pretty unique. I don't think there's any other album ranking list like that. And of course, I'll throw in a few honorable mentions as well, some albums that I really loved that didn't just quite make the cut. But there will be one song from each album on a playlist that will be linked in the description. It's a Spotify playlist, and it's a song from each album, so it gives you a chance to try each album out a little bit, see what you like, what you don't like, and then maybe give them a listen. I recommend listening to all of them, of course. That's why they're in my list, but maybe there are some things that you're more gravitated towards, and that's what the playlist is there for, to help you find some new music. So without further ado, let's jump in. Let's start with number 10, my 10th favorite album of 2024. To kick us off, I have Empress at number 10 with her 4th studio album, For Your Consideration. We had so many strong contenders in pop music this year, so it was easy for this one to kind of fly under the radar, but it doesn't make it any less worthwhile. It's a crisp half-hour listen, and it kind of highlights the highs and lows of passion and love and that sort of wild ride that takes you on. Despite this being my introduction to her music, I really feel right away that she's not a newbie to this sort of situation. She has been around, she has seen these sorts of scenarios play out, and she expresses that in her music. She documents her experiences with love through lyrics that are engineered as catchy, danceable hits. Despite utilizing her bilingualism a lot, jumping between English and Spanish, the music comes across as super accessible to really anyone who has experienced that sort of intense, heated love in their lives. Don't let For Your Consideration slip off your radar. It's worth giving a proper listen. Speaking of pop music, is there anyone in the pop genre right now making waves like Billie Eilish and her brother on album number 9 of the list, Hit Me Hard and Soft? I mean, nothing in the mainstream sounds like this. Nothing sounds like Billie. I think this album really cements her as one of the pop greats of the 21st century. I'm just floored by the advancements of sounds and production on this thing. I mean, the listener really can notice growth and comfort in Billie's identity and who she is, especially since her coming out this past year. The whole thing just feels angelic, and a lot of that is thanks to her brother Phineas and his work on production. It's incredible. I'm always blown away by it, but especially on this iteration. Lyrically, the content is very raw. We see her at maybe her most vulnerable. And when it's all said and done, I think this album really proves that Billie and Phineas can not only make something special, but they can do that without running out of ideas. And next time will be a totally new and interesting iteration that I look forward to. Number 8 on this list is serpentwithfeet with his album Grip, which shows him exploring his physical side, literally, it's on the album cover, but in the music as well. And I've always admired his previous output. I've really liked his previous projects. I think Grip feels a lot more accessible to the casual viewer, and I would say I'm a more casual fan of Serpentwithfeet. But after this album, I feel my perspective on his music has completely changed. I really like that he retains that unique sort of soulful element to his voice while still pulling from R&B greats, inspiration from people like D'Angelo, for example. Getting in this genre's bag kind of allows him the chance to emphasize those feelings of love and lust and curiosity in a flirtatious, not too serious way. And while this approach may be a one-off for him, I really hope that Serpentwithfeet comes back and uses this style a bit more in future projects, but we'll just have to wait and see. All right, I was nervous that he wouldn't keep the streak alive, but Don Toliver continues to make the list. He is on number 7 with his album HARDSTONE Psycho, And don't get me wrong, I would consider this his weakest in his professional discography. But with that said, the highlights of this thing just can't be ignored. I mean, like the rawness of a song like Tour Up, just the vibes of 4x4 and Purple. I mean, you can't forget Purple Rain with Future and Metro. That song is incredible. They're just some of the coolest songs he's made in his career. Now, of course, Don still delivers that melodic trap sort of R&B sound that he's always done, but it's got a bit more of a theme to it. It's a bit grimier, a little heavier on the guitar and on the drums. It certainly feels more rock inspired, more sort of like biker thematically, which I respect. I think it's an interesting choice. I think it chops it up, it changes it a bit. As I've listened to it more, it's grown on me a bit. I just wish we had a Kali Uchis feature. I don't know why we can't get her on one of these songs, bro. Is that too much to ask? But yeah. Girls, number 6 on this list proved that it was indeed a BRAT summer. I mean, do I even need to say anything about this one? It was iconic. The album pushed forward such incredible new ideas for music, especially in like the electronic hyperpop space, while touching on the theme of that internal conflict in Charli, where she's split between her sort of wild party life and the idea of her future and settling down as she's getting older. And I mean, Charli, just like the rest of us, grapples with the idea of growing old and what your legacy will be as you age. I think the remix album of this especially really is just phenomenal. That especially took me by surprise. The subjects in the album are kind of approached again, but from a different perspective and a sort of change in the idea in the remix. It's super fascinating. They feel like totally unique songs, but still kind of borrow elements of the original, so it sort of keeps you involved. It keeps you sort of knowing what's going on. I just really like both versions a lot. I think they kind of share this spot here in the number 6 spot. And I don't know, I find that each song in its respective remix kind of goes together like a nice wine and chocolate. I really like that Charli kind of has this expression where it's just her, and then a separate album to sort of get input from other artists in spanning all kinds of genres. I mean, what other album could you have Bon Iver and Blade on the same album? That's insane. That's crazy. Okay, it gives me great pleasure to start the top 5 with Quadeca and his hit mixtape Scrapyard. How an album full of throwaways and loosies and things that he just couldn't squeeze onto his last album turned into one of the best projects released this year. I mean, it's still a mystery to me. I don't know how he did it, but the attention to detail, the love and care that's put into each song, it's understandable why he's considered one of the top up-and-coming artists in his genre. But I guess the real question is, like, what is his genre? What do we call Quadeca? I mean, I guess he's not too bothered by the question, because whatever it is, he is really becoming a master at what he does. He blends so much together and makes songs like A La Carte with Break-Ins, Easier, Way Too Many Friends, which, I mean, it's so interesting because they're all so different. They are all such different songs from each other, but cohesively, they just blend so well together. It's one of those album covers that I feel like just captures exactly what it sounds like so perfectly to me. It feels like it really sort of strips back a lot of that sort of over-engineered, overproduced, and it just feels so emotionally open. It feels like we really hear Quadeca himself speaking to us through his music. I can't wait to see what he does with his next project, which I think will be a lot more united conceptually. I think we'll have a pretty overarching theme. And all I've found is that each project that we've gotten from him has been so much more mature than the last. So I am really looking forward to whatever we see next from him. Kehlani received a lot of mixed reception with her first of 2 albums released this year, which was Crash, but I have it as my number 4 spot this year. She chops it up, she keeps it fresh, song to song, although I will admit it's understandable if that sort of mishmash, that genre inconsistency is not for everybody, but I personally found it to all be kind of linked through one theme that I think a lot of people are overlooking, which is that Kehlani knows exactly what she wants and she's going to go out there and get it. It is a confident album. It's not boxed into a genre. It doesn't have to be one type of pop or R&B. The result of it is super versatile, and it's her saying in as many ways as she can that she knows what she's looking for and she's going to get it. I think if anything, it proves that in the future, She has so many options. She has so much range and things she can try. And the thing is, she released another album a few weeks later, and it was very boxed in, and it was very sort of her doing that usual pop R&B thing, which is fine. It's pleasant. It's a good listen. I found it a little boring, but critically it is much better received. I encourage you to listen to both and tell me which one you think is better, but for me, Crash clearly took it, and I still think it's one of the best pop albums this year. Matt Champion helped me process last year's Brockhampton breakup with album number 3, his thought-provoking Mika's Laundry. And I'm going to be honest, I don't think without this breakup we ever get to see this side of Matt, this sort of exposure, this rawness from him, where we really see his emotional side come out. We really see he's more than just a rapper. Like, can we even call him that anymore? I mean, you listen to this album and there are songs like G-Biv and Everybody Likes You, and it just makes me think that more than anything, he struggles with his identity. Who is he and what value does he provide outside of this group setting that, I mean, he's been used to for all these years? I mean, if I'm giving advice, I would say that whatever journey he's on, I encourage him to just keep us on it, because this expression by him is so beautiful. It's so interesting. It's unlike really any album that I had listened to this year. It really tries a lot of new things, and I appreciate that a lot. It feels sort of all over the place genre-wise, but in a good way. I really appreciate it. In the same way that Quadeca's album was. I think if we get a silver lining from Brockhampton splitting up, it's that we really get to see the full potential of Matt Champion as a solo artist. And I really hope that we get to see more ways that he uses his multi-layer talents to express himself further. So I'll take that as a win. Now, you know who shocked me this year was the number 2 spot, which is Lemon Twigs with A Dream Is All We Know. This duo rides a very fine line of sort of wearing their influences on their sleeve without being derivative. I mean, I would even call this like a love letter to the sounds that led to so many of the traits of what we know in modern music today. If you miss that sort of return to basics, I think you would really like this. And what I mean by that is that even these guys will tell you that the Beach Boys and the Beatles really inspire the type of music that they make. So if those are the types of artists you're into, you might be sold on this. And if not, then let me tell you that they pull some tricks out of their sleeve that I think give them a really fun and uplifting twist on sort of an older sound. It sounds better engineered, it sounds a bit more interesting, while still sort of falling on those crutches of that, you know, sort of late 60s, early 70s rock kind of finding its way. It's not really like anything that's usually in my year-end list, but I am really happy that I gave it a shot. I'm really happy that people recommended it to me, and it ended up being the number 2 album of the year for me, which is, you know, quite a Cinderella story. So kudos to Lemon Twigs. I would definitely say that they are worth checking out. All right. Before we get into number 1, let's acknowledge some honorable mentions. I would say Denzel Curry put out one of the hardest hitting hip hop projects this year, if not the best, with King of the Mischievous South 2. Really loved that. Meanwhile, in the R&B space, Lucky Daye put out a pretty solid project called Algorithm. I enjoyed it, not as much as his last album, but still really a good listen. Ericdoa, aside from the whole low taper fade thing, also put out a solo album, and I thought it was his best solo album to date. It had a lot of those hyperpop elements that I really like, but it used a lot of percussive elements that made it feel a lot more accessible to like a pop fan, so definitely recommend that. Lastly, in this sort of section of the honorable mentions, I have to shout out Bring Me the Horizon. Their album was good. It had some really incredible songs, some of my favorite songs by them. But directionally, it just felt kind of all over the place. I felt like I wanted it to feel a bit more cohesive and a bit more focused when you compare it to like their album from 2020, which, as you probably know, I really love. I wouldn't put it at that level, but if there were songs on that album you enjoyed, this one definitely has some great songs. So don't forget about that. And lastly, I want to kind of acknowledge SZA's SOS Deluxe LANA. It's hard because like if it were a solo album by itself, I think it would have made top 5. Actually, it might have made top 3. I love that thing, whatever you want to call it, that the batch of songs that for whatever reason just has to be packed onto and 2-year-old album that's been on the Billboard 200 the whole time. I don't know why it has to be on there. I love the music, hate the deluxe trend, but you know, shout out SZA because they are all really great songs. They're all fantastic songs. I just wish that it was its own album, and I guess you can call it whatever you want. It's up to you. If you want to put it, you know, in your list, go for it. I chose to abstain from doing that, primarily because of this whole deluxe thing, but also because it came out like a couple weeks ago. I mean, it's still pretty fresh, so yeah, definitely recommend listening to those though. All right, rant over. My number one, my favorite album of the year. It was a very clear winner, and something that emotionally I just feel like I connected with on so many levels. So please, if you listen to one album from 2024, make it Porter Robinson's Smile. Like, that's literally the name of the album. It's like Smile. That's, yeah. Now, when I recommend this album to people, they always ask, well, like, what does it sound like? What genre is it? And I've never really known how to answer that question. And I had to write, you know, the script for this, and I had to think about what would I call this album? And to me, what I would like to call it is hopeful music. It's music to give you hope. And sure, it's got elements of pop, electronic, dance, and there's even like slower ballads in there. But at the end of the day, in a world where everything always feels like it's getting worse, this album's goal is to make you feel better, which is something that it feels like it's hard to find in music these days. I think a lot of music really capitalizes on the sort of the rush of the really great and really bad in the world. And sometimes you just want music that makes you feel like, you know what, I can make it to tomorrow. And I think a great example of that is the song Russian Roulette on here, where Porter literally talks about wanting to put a gun to his head. He's playing this Russian roulette game, and at the end of it all, when it doesn't go the way that, you know, it could go, he exclaims that he wants to live. He says, I want to live, I don't want to die. And that feeling of just, you know what, I want to keep going, I want to live. To have that in music the way that it's presented by Porter, it's just not like anything that I have found in the wild yet. Getting a little deeper into it, one of my favorite songs from the album is called Year of the Cup. In it, Porter basically talks about the sort of potion that he's put together for his success and how he's gotten to where he is. And that really resonated with me. In a year where I took a lot of risks, I traveled around the world, and despite taking that leap of faith, I ended up in a better place, my own apartment, a job I love, working with people I love, surrounded by friends and family. I'm just really grateful and I'm really blessed, and it just felt like that song captured it so perfectly. At the end of the day, I poured my cup. I made whatever's in that cup that made me successful, and I'm happy with it. I'm I'm glad, I'm grateful for what I put in my cup. So for a guy who made his name famous from club and rave music, it's just such a crazy direction for him to go, and I hope people really appreciate it. I truly do, because he does something so different and so necessary in the world for people, especially young people living in the society we live in. And I adore every second of it. So please check that album out if you don't listen to any other albums on this list. All right, one final thing before I wrap it up. In 2025, I'm setting a goal. I want to listen to 250 new albums. I'm tired of being behind the times and not knowing what the good music is, you know. It's tough, but sometimes you just have to be disciplined and sit down and put on an album. And if you have to stop it in the middle, that's fine. But I want to have a New Year's resolution, I'm saying it on camera, so that by the end of the year, I have listened to at least 250 new albums from this year, just from this year, 250 new albums. That sort of listening is what got me making these lists in the first place, because I had music to share with people. And sometimes I feel like the music I share with people is not anything new or interesting. I want to show you guys music that you don't know about or that you would never expect to be considered one of the best albums of the year. And that is my goal for the end of 2025, is to have listened to enough music to really surprise you with some entries in my list at the end of the year. And hey, who knows, maybe I check out this Chappell Roan character you guys keep telling me about. We'll see though. But I think I've left you with plenty of material to check out. Again, there's that Spotify playlist in the description. Go check that out. get some new music under your belt as we get into the new year. And also tell me your favorite albums of the year in the comments. I would love to hear the albums that you love, because I'll still be going back and listening to some 2024 stuff and some stuff obviously from before then. So please tell me your favorite albums. I would love to check those out. Thank you for watching. So long, lots of love. Have a wonderful and prosperous 2025. Thank you.